Hi my YouTubers, welcome back to Short and Spicy Nikks. This is your girl Nikki speaking. How you guys doing today? Let's get into the video. So I've been sharing my story since 2019. I went through a very traumatic time. At that time, my eldest son and I ended up in the hospital. But I started to figure out what was going on in my life, and I started speaking out a lot. So I was getting attacked a whole lot during that time. I started to share my story on YouTube and social media because at that time I felt that I had a moral responsibility in letting everyone know what my mother-in-law was doing and has been doing for years. And I thought I was able to get away, per se. I made it out with my life. How many sacrifices has she made? How many people's lives has she affected? How many more were going through some of the things that I've gone through, other individuals have gone through, that has been swept under the rug because they were just keeping hush-hush and no one was speaking out, and everyone was afraid to speak out, afraid of what her son, my baby father, would think of them. He is a person that doesn't believe anything really that his mom has done that is supposed to be wrong. As you see the title, it's dealing with a toxic mother-in-law. So let's retrack back to 1996. I met the father of my children at that time. It was I think ending August, early September, something like that. And I was in and out of different homes, living with family friends, family members, just bouncing from one place to the other. And I was going to my aunt's apartment on that day, and I saw him outside, and first I said to myself, when he tried to talk to me, I'm like, you know what, this is not my type, you know. I had left my home, living with my father and my stepmother, and that was also a toxic situation. I was being molested basically by my father. I was physically abused by him. I was going through issues with my stepmother as well. I spoke about this in other videos, so this is not about that. So I was going through toxic situation living at home, so I left there and was bouncing from place to place with, you know, different family members and friends, like I said. So on this particular day, I had went to go pick up some clothes from a family friend that said I was no longer able to stay with her, and I was bringing it to my aunt's building, to her apartment. That's the building, the same building that my children's father lived on. It happened. So I took his number or whatever. All of that took place, and I think the following week, yeah, it was that fast, I went to see him. I lied to my aunt, which I was staying at. Not the same aunt that lived on his building, but the aunt that I was actually residing with at that moment. I told her I was going to my friend Diane's house. Yes, Diane, I'm sorry. I lied. I had gone to my friend's on different occasions to stay with her, but this time, I don't know. I decided to go to this guy's house. even though the aunt that lived on his building, she was taking care of a young girl around my age or a little bit younger, and I asked her about him, and she said, "Who, him? No, 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 run fast. Him change girl every week." And that still didn't deter me, because the same day I was asking her that is the same day I was planning to go to see him. And I took the 2-hour travel time from the city I was living in, and I went to that city and I met with him, and I was at his house. He brought me into the apartment, and his mom was sitting around the table, you know. I don't know, she was writing something, lights on, and, you know, just writing. And I'm like, okay. So he brought me into his room, and we sat down and we were talking, and I'm like, he wanted to do the do. And I said to him, sorry, not right now. I don't feel comfortable. Let me go say hi to your mom. I haven't even said hi to your mom. Like, I don't even, you know, you just want to take me in. He just took me in the house and, "Hi, Mom," and then straight to his room. You know, nothing. She just looked and said hi, saw me, and it was like nothing to her. Mind you, he had lied to me about his age and everything. Told me he was a certain age, and it really wasn't so. Said that he was turning 18, because I said to him I was turning 18. And it turned out, I found later on from his mother, that he was actually only turning 16. But because I'm small and I don't look my age, I believed him. But that's how it started off, rocky and with lies. So, you know, that's how I met his mother, per se. Turned out, a month after that, the next month, I was about to graduate from high school. And I went to graduation, invited his mom. She came, and I went home with her, expecting to see him. He wasn't there, because he was out on... he had ran away from the young offenders, they call it, home, and he had done something that same night when I went to graduation, and his mom came, and the police arrested him, and he was locked up. So I didn't find that out until the next morning, because I stayed over. I slept there, right? Everything was already gone bad. I had found out that I was pregnant, yeah, because during the time after I met him initially, I went to his house the first time and went back home. I was starting to get, you know, all that pregnancy feeling and everything, and I took a test, and yeah, the day of my graduation, I actually, either I called the clinic or they called me or whatever, and to find out the test, and they said that I was pregnant. So I told him, and that's another story. So anyways, the morning after my graduation, because I stayed over that night because I thought he was going to come home or whatever, ended up he didn't come home. So the next day, the police came to the door and informed his mother that he was arrested. So during that time and my pregnancy, he was arrested for our firstborn. We were both young, and I would leave from my aunt's house in the city that she lived in, that we lived in, and I would come down to his home and stay with his mother during the weekend, over the weekends. After a while, I had stopped staying with my aunt. She advised me to go to a pregnancy home close to where she lived, and I did, and I was getting assisted by them with a lot of things, right? So I would only leave the pregnancy home on weekends, and I would still not go to my aunt, who was in the same city as the pregnancy home, and go to his mother, where she lived. And I was just I felt I was closer to him that way. It wasn't my intention to be pregnant at 17 turning 18, and you know, he was very young and immature, so he was denying that he could make children. And then his mom, I remember once before he got arrested, his mom had spoken to him about it, and he came downstairs to where I was visiting the aunt that lives on the building where he lives, to let me know, or somebody came to me and said that his mom wanted to speak to me. And I went upstairs and I spoke to her, and she asked me if I really was pregnant, and I said yes. And you know, she said that she got pregnant early as well, and his sister that passed also got pregnant with his nephew early. His sister had passed, so the mother was taking care of the nephew, and they grew up as brothers. So anyway, so that's that. And you know, he came in a little bit after saying that his mom spoke to him and he finally accepted it. So he had accepted it before he got arrested the day of my graduation and was put in jail, juvenile, whatever you want to call that. So during the time he was in the juvenile detention, like I said, I would come down from the city I lived and stay with his mother. Yes, so mind you, I was in the pregnancy home, and I would leave on weekends, go and stay with his mother, and I would bring down things. I learned how to make coconut drops and all kind of stuff, so I would bring down coconut drops, you know, there. And she had a gentleman living with her. He was younger than her, but he was older than me. He was I would say in his probably late 30s, and I was only like 17, 18, something like that. So that gentleman, we're gonna call him Johnny. Yeah, so he was staying with her, and also a next gentleman at one point, an older gentleman, was staying with her at one point as well. So I would go there, and it would be most of the three of us there. Her, the gentleman, Johnny, and myself, right? But I would speak to her son whenever he calls, because he's incarcerated, and he was incarcerated for most of the time of my pregnancy. So we did have somewhat of a close relationship, his mother and I thought that we had a close relationship. She would tell me things about him, you know, from the time he was born, you know, to, you know, his father, the relationship with her and his father, everything about him I knew. During that 9 months of pregnancy, I think she told me every single thing that I should know about my children's father. I actually started to fall in love with him just by, you know, her stories of him and pictures. She would show me pictures from the time he was born to, you know, however old he was, pictures of her daughter that passed, his nephew that was not there either. He was living with the Children's Aid Society and stuff, and it was just a lot of information, and I thought we developed a bond and we were close. Before I had the baby, I got a place living close to her. I found a place on a street close to where she lived, and I was talking to her son about when he comes home, you know, him living with me and growing up our child together and all of that. And he was very excited, you know, wanting to know how it's gonna work, him having his key, you know, all of that stuff. Mind you, I'm there family planning with this young man, and not knowing that his mother was not having any of that, because apparently she was saying that he's too young to live with anyone, and he's not going anywhere, you know. So I felt like at that point is when things took a turn for the worse, because this loving woman that I felt I had a bond with so much was changing little by little without my knowledge, because she wasn't saying it to me, but she was still right beside me everywhere I go. She would be there. My aunt had my aunt in the city that I lived with that told me to go to the pregnancy home. She had a baby shower for me, and it was her who she told to, you know, arrange for me to come there that day, you know, to surprise me. I had no knowledge of it. And I think that's when I met my children's father's other sister with her mother, right? Basically my mother-in-law's matey, because apparently they were friends. The other sister is half sister's mother and her were friends, and the half sister's mother was dealing with my children's father's father before his mother, and some mix up between that, and she ended up being with him as well, and you know, he was born shortly after. Like, don't want to get into the midst of that, but that's when I met her, I believe. I can't remember if I'd met her before that, sorry. When I was pregnant, my mother-in-law took me to go meet his sister, yeah, at her house, and I met the sister's mother then. Yeah, that's how it went. So anyways, my aunt had a shower for me in the city that, you know, where I stayed at the pregnancy home, and everyone was there, and it was so exciting and whatever. Yeah, she still remained close with me. I still would go to her, you know, on weekends, and I got my place and she would come there, and it was actually her that was there with me when I went into labor. You know, I went into labor, and she was there. We drove together. I called my aunt, the one that lived on her building, the building that they lived on before, because they had moved at this time. She had moved, and mind you, all this time my children's father was still incarcerated, so she was there through everything. And we called my aunt's husband, and he's the one who came and brought us to the hospital. And I had a very long labor. I was going through a lot. It was 26 hours of labor, you know. I was in severe pain. I think 13 hours in, I could have had the baby, but something was just stopping the baby from coming, you know. I later found out that the cord was wrapped around my son's neck. My stepmother was there, like a whole family, my aunt, my uncles, my aunts, different aunts and uncle, and everyone was in the room. And you know, my mother-in-law was there. It was getting so bad, they were calling different specialists to come and see me, and it was just it was so scary, you know. I was given so many different medications. I was starting to swell, and everyone was worried. My stepmom was there, because I still had a relationship with her, even though it was so tumultuous when I moved out. Relationships were mended, and she was, you know, still in my life. And she called her pastor, my stepmom, and he prayed for me, and you know, we're there. And then my mother-in-law called someone, she said that was her pastor, and he prayed for me. And after that, things were just getting worse, you know. I was out of it. I don't know what was going on, you know. I was basically out of it, you know. When they hit my reflexes, they were just bouncing out of the place, all over the place. So that took place, and they're about to whisk me off into the operating room, but I had my son. And after having my son, you know, his father wasn't there and everything. And he was put in the incubator and put in the ICU. And I was just given a picture of him. The nurses took a picture of him and brought it to me to to keep it beside me. And, you know, I was there. So the next day after I had baby now, my children's father called me from the young offenders detention that he was at, and he said that his mother saw a gentleman that lives on their building, and he told her that he was my son's father. And I was like, what? And I was even speaking to him saying, what are you talking about? What does she mean? And I remember the gentleman who she was speaking of, because the only time I had seen that gentleman after meeting him through my children's father, when I started to go see him at the building, was when he saw me with my mother-in-law. That was the second time, or the only other time I remember seeing that gentleman, was once my mother-in-law and I was going into the elevator, and he was in the elevator as well, and he's looking at me and he was shocked, and he's like, what, you? And then he's asking me if it was for, you know, her son, because they lived there on the building together, so they know each other. And I said yes, and he was shocked. He's like, what? That's fast, whatever, right? So when my baby father said that his mom just told him that gentleman told her that he was my child's father, I'm like, what? How does that come by? Mind you, this gentleman is dark, so dark, and it's an older man. Not to say it couldn't happen, but I didn't know. She's never seen me with that man. Every time I came to her to stay with her, I was in the house, you know, just sitting down. I wouldn't go anywhere without her, right? And the only other male that was there was the Johnny that I told you that was staying with her. So she, you know, I was crying. I was like hysterical. I was crying, and I just came off of a life-threatening labor experience, having my son. My son was still in the incubator in the intensive care, and I just had a picture of my son. And then for him to say that to me, he wasn't there for the labor or anything, and for him to call and to tell me this, that his mother told him, somebody told him this, it was just like, what? At that time I was wondering why and what is going on, but it still didn't register to me. You know, I was young. Later on, I would say years later, I realized, I would say even in 2019 is when I started to everything started to come to bump. So now back to what transpired after that. So, you know, things were going. I lived at my own place. The children's father would come by every so often where I lived. He ended up not living with me. He came out and he went to his mom. I would leave from my house, and I would push a stroller and go down to where they lived, because like I said, I got a place close to where they live now in the city, in Toronto, you know, a big city. So, you know, he was free doing whatever. He felt like he was out there just being a young man, a young gentleman, just a teenager, because he was like 16 at that time, you know, turning 17. And, you know, he would still come to see me and his child, but basically he was living with his mom and still doing what young boys do. And I remember once I brought my son down there, and she was on the balcony with my baby, young baby. They lived on like the 3rd floor, and she had the baby in her hand. You see all of this? We'll get to that. She had my young son in her arms, and she was standing close to the balcony, or have the baby holding and just holding him in her hand, in her arm like this, and you know, right by the balcony. And I had anxiety at that time. I'm like, no, that didn't sit well with me. And I asked her, could you please take the baby off the balcony, and especially so close to the ledge like that? And she got upset. And she's like, what? You think I'm the first me I have me an old baby? I take care of how much baby I've been taking care of babies. And I was basically saying to her, like, it doesn't matter how much baby you've taken care of. Like, I don't feel good. I'm having anxiety. I don't like it. Take my baby off the balcony, please. Well, she got upset and tell me to go home, go to my house and whatever. And I took my baby, got the baby ready, strapped the baby up, put him in the stroller, and I just went to my house. And from there, I didn't really go back down to his house. He was there, but like I said, he's a young man, and he's more for whatever his mom says. Right? And he kissed his son, and I just went home. It went on like that. The gentleman that lived with her when I was pregnant, like I said, it was 3 of us most of the time there. You know, after a little while, my children's father, my baby father, started to come to see me, and he would bring that gentleman too, because you know, he's like a family friend. So they would always come to where I lived. It's just a few minutes walk, 10 to 15 minutes walk to where I lived. And they would always come there, you know, and he would come there with him. My baby father always had a key to where I lived. So they come there and spend time, whatever, and then they leave. Now, this gentleman, I later found out that he was having a relationship with my mother-in-law. I don't remember who made me aware, either her or he made me aware of it. But at the time, he was in a relationship with a girl that was in high school. And he said that my mother-in-law knew about it. Well, things started getting sour with him and my mother-in-law. And he started to come by where I lived more often. And she realized that. And so she started to pop up at my home where I lived, unannounced and everything. And I remember once she came there and she's like, well, everybody is up at Nikki. Everybody there Nikki, so me I forgot come on Nikki too, and there Nick. She said that to me. And then she started telling me about a story of how she remembered her friend had another friend, and her friend realized the other friend was showing her face and acting strange, and then it came to it that the friend was sleeping with the other friend's man, and that's why she was showing the friend bad face. Some story she started to tell me once, as if to say that her and I are not close anymore. You know, subliminal. You know, when someone's trying to tell you a story and saying they've realized that we're not close to get anymore, and basically she was hinting that I was sleeping with that gentleman who she said is her man. I remember once I couldn't find my key, and I looked up and down for my key. I looked into the sofa. I turned it upside down because they were a very light old sofa that I got from family members who gave me secondhand stuff. And I felt she took my key just because of what was going on and what she had said. So I had taken my firstborn to go down to her house to confront her, and she told me no, she don't have my key. So I went back home, and then shortly after, whatever days or whatever after, she came there once, and Johnny was sitting in one chair, I was sitting in the other, and she was sitting in the love seat, you know, the single chair seat. And when my head was turned, I just heard her say, jingling something in her hand, "Isn't this the key?" And I go, "What?" Where did you find that? And she go, down in here, sir. And she dig her hand down in the side of the chair and said that's where she found it. And I'm like, really? Couldn't have found it in there. Anywhere else. I had a 3-seater that if she said there, I would have more believed her, because that had a hole in it and everything, even though I turned it upside down. But that single chair, I had turned upside down, shaking, shaking, shaking. And if that key was in there, it would have been found. I tell you that because she had started to tell her son, my children's father, that I was sleeping with Johnny. And I believe from then is when my children's father started to change towards me. He started to treat me really bad. I ended up moving from that apartment, but I moved to one very close, right beside it. And he would come there as well. But he wasn't there as often. He wouldn't come as often anymore. Until once he came, well, let me retract back. Eventually, Johnny, the gentleman that, you know, is a family friend and that was involved with my mother-in-law, came to me and asked me if he could put some items in my storage room in the building that I lived. And I said, okay. And then he asked me if he could stay there with me in the couch in my living room, because he explained to me that my mother-in-law had taken his girlfriend's picture out of the room that he was staying, and he couldn't find a boxer. And then she brought it back to him and said that he would never have another child again. This is where the story of Obia comes in. My mother-in-law used to talk about it a whole lot, and I always spoke against it and didn't believe in it. Witchcraft, voodoo, black magic, whatever you want to call it. And when he told me that story, I believe that's what he was trying to tell me as well. But I was clueless to what was going on in my life. You know, it so happened that he was staying there, but my children's father was still coming by me whenever he feels like, whenever he chooses, because he has a key. And you know, his relationship with me was just everything that happens at the house, he would go back to his mother and let her know what's going on. I was at her house once, and you know, after being evicted from that second home that I lived at, because something happened there and I had to move, and I put my stuff in storage, and I was down staying with her for a bit. Mind you, my baby father was not there. That was his residence, but he was outside just being a boy, just doing whatever. But I was staying there, and his sister from his father's side and her mother was speaking to my mother-in-law once and said that my baby father needs to take care of his son. And I wasn't there for the conversation, but when I went to stay over by them, because I ended up staying with them after a little bit, because it was getting too much there at where she lives. And when I went there, they told me that she said, you know, he doesn't need to take care of no one. Make social services take care of her. Him don't need to take care of nothing. Let social services take care of her. So that was that. And you know, the relationship wasn't great, but I still had that lady in my life.